Good evening. You're watching India Prime with me, Sana Khan. Tonight we talk about what the nation is talking about, but delve into the story to get you a sense of just how left-wing extremism or Naxal violence has thrived in India. Left-wing extremism has been the biggest killer of our security forces if we go by the data of the past decade. The ghastly Naxal attack on India's Central Reserve Police Force personnel, Jawans in Chhattisgarh Sukma district, is the biggest Naxal attack on the CRPF in the last 7 years. It was a 99 Jawans versus approximately 300 Naxals, clearly odds stacked against the CRPF personnel. Casualty numbers, 25 CRPF Jawans, while only about 12 to 13 Maoists were gunned down in the gun battle. Tonight we talk about how this was possible, what makes Maoists plan and execute an attack of this nature on Indian soldiers. This is a strong 99-member CRPF battalion we are talking about. I'll get into that discussion in just a bit, but a look first at the headlines. Home Minister Rajnath Singh pays tribute to the Sukma martyrs, says the government will devise a new strategy to tackle left-wing extremism. Animal welfare group PETA urges Prime Minister Narendra Modi to ban meat from menus at government meetings. The Central Bureau of Investigation files an FIR against its former director Ranjit Sinha to probe accusations that he attempted to influence the coal block scam probe during his tenure as the head of the agency. And bail to 2008 Malegaon blast accused Sadhvi Pragya. Bombay High Court lets her out on a bond of 5 lakh rupees, while Colonel Srikant Purohit's bail plea has been rejected. Now, a big focus continues to remain on the deadliest Maoist ambush on CRPF personnel in 7 years now. India's Home Minister Rajnath Singh, who is in Chhattisgarh, has said that the centre has decided to revise its left-wing extremism strategy and has called a meeting of the state government officials on the 8th of May.
हमारे सीआरपीएफ के बहादुर जवानों का यह बलिदान किसी भी सूरत में हम लोग व्यर्थ नहीं जाने देंगे। हमारी जो LWE की स्ट्रेटजी है उसको हम पुनः रिव्यू करने जा रहे हैं। जरूरत होगी तो हम उसे रिवाइज भी करेंगे और 8 मई को दिल्ली में वह बैठक मैंने बुलाई है और कई राज्यों के अधिकारी उस बैठक में मौजूद रहेंगे।
Now, Rajnath Singh also met the injured paramilitary soldiers at a hospital in Raipur. According to top sources in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Director General of the CRPF has been told to stay put in Sukma for 2 days and get every detail on operational preparedness of the force and file a quick short report for the Home Ministry to take action. Sources also say the Maoists who were involved in the Sukma attack have been identified. Dreaded Maoist leader Hidma is suspected to be behind the attack. He is the commander of the 2nd Battalion of the People's Liberation Guerrilla Army. The PLGA is the armed wing of CPI Maoists. President Pranab Mukherjee and Prime Minister Narendra Modi both have condemned this attack.
आने वाले दिनों में और भी कोऑर्डिनेटेड तरीका से इस चुनौती को स्वीकार करेंगे हम लोग और इन लोगों को छोड़ेंगे नहीं है। ये तो मानव विरोधी है, मानवता विरोधी है। इन लोगों ने जिस तरह का ये दुष्कृत्य किया है ये केवल निंदनीय ऐसा नहीं है। इन लोगों को किसी हालत में छोड़ना नहीं चाहिए।
We can declare in parts of where these Naxalites are in LTTs or LTT was, and now it's not, they're finished, we have finished them. The Muslim jihadis like in Kashmir, there we must declare a state of emergency, which means no human rights. all human rights suspended.
This is frustration of Maoists because they are losing everywhere and they are losing ground support also because people want, the tribals want development, and therefore this is their act of desperation.
And let's take a quick look at why the Sukma region is important both for the government and the Naxalites. First up, Sukma is a part of the Bastar belt in Chhattisgarh. It is one of the main Maoist centers in the state. Sukma shares its borders with the states of Orissa and Telangana. It's a tribal belt, heavily forested, also mineral rich, but non-industrialized. Over 5,000 kilometers of roads are being built in 44 Naxal hit districts. The Indian government is also building 2 roads through the Naxal belt in Sukma itself. These roads, the government says, will give easy access to the Naxal heartland and can help bring schools, hospitals to the remotest of remote areas. The Naxal see roads as a threat to themselves as well as to the tribal culture. On the 11th of March this year, Naxals, remember, attacked the Injiram Bheji road in Sukma. On the 24th of April, that's yesterday, the Naxals there attacking the Dornapal Jagargonda road in Sukma, killing 25 CRPF personnel. All right, joining me here in the studio is WION senior editor Surya Gangadharan to get us a perspective on how things are looking at this point in time. Of course, it's a deadly attack, Surya, but the big question is, what do these Maoists, what do they want?
Well, the Maoists basically subscribe to an ideology which calls for overthrow of existing political and social structures by force, and that permeates their ideology. And when they typically move into any one area, they first target the local administration, eliminating whether it's police or governance or any aspect of administration they destroy. And they remove that link between the people and that government administrative structure. And then they go about intimidating and coercing people into joining them and building up their support base for taking the war against the government to the next level. So this is basically what they want. They want to set up their own ideological state. Of course, I'm not sure how much of ideology is left in these groups. It's now mostly a case of extortion and killing, you know.
Right. Also, Surya, you know, they say that Maoist violence, several reports say it's ranked 4th after, you know, Taliban, the Islamic State, and Nigeria's Boko Haram. Now, that itself says a lot. The kind of weapons that they use are extremely modern. How do they get these weapons? Where does the money come from is also a question that we all ask every time an attack of this magnitude happens. The last, of course, the biggest one was back in 2010, in which 76 CRPF Jawans were killed. But the question remains, you know, about their strategy, how they every time, you know, beat the security forces at their, you know, game.
See, they operate in a terrain which is their own. And it's only, I think, in the last few years that the CRP has begun recruiting tribals from this region. So that, in a sense, has helped. But, you know, there are a lot of questions about whether the CRP is the right force to be employed in these areas. Basically, their training, orientation, leadership, organization, it's all, there are a lot of question marks about it. And if you recall all the casualties that have been suffered so far, you go through the entire list, you'll find there are very few high-level officers who are casualty. I'm not saying they should be, but at the level of assistant commandant or commandant, you rarely ever find such officers being killed in such encounters. It's mostly sub-inspectors and constables. You know.
So
that tells you something about the character of this force.
Right. So, you know, there was a talk. Let's first go back to the year 2010 and look at what happened then and what happened now. Not much of a difference. The casualty figures, of course, then were very high as far as the CRPF Jawans were concerned. But there was a lot of talk about how the government needs to come up with a strategy, a plan to tackle Naxal violence. You know, there was a lot of hype at that point in time. Nothing seems to have changed.
I think that's the problem with government, you know. After each attack, there's an emergency meeting, everybody gets together, some people are transferred, and then it's slowly back to the same old system, you know. There doesn't seem to be any new ideas that come out of this. And perhaps their entire approach towards dealing with this insurgency must be reworked, you know. But one doesn't find any new ideas coming up. It's again the same old militarized kind of policy, which perhaps is not yielding the kind of dividends it should.
Right. Pratyush Dubey, WION's correspondent, joins us live from the newsroom. Pratyush, what is the latest bit of news that you're getting? Of course, the government seems to be in action at this point. Rajnath Singh, we heard him call this a cold-blooded murder. What happened in Sukma? What next?
Well, Sana, you know, our sister concern Z colleagues in that channel were the first people on the ground. So we have some first-hand information about the situation in Sukma right now, what the way these combing operations are going on, and what are the first steps. So going in that order, right now in Sukma, and particularly in this area where this attack happened, what the CRPF has done, that they have deployed additional forces. There's been a request to the center to dispatch more people. That's number one. That's the first thing that they've done there. Second, just to ensure to track down those who are running away, because they say that the CRPF's report has said that scores of Maoist terrorists who were involved in this attack have been killed. But as a practice, what the Maoists do is that they take away the bodies of their dead colleagues so as not to leave any proof behind, so that no concrete totaling of this number can be done. But in order to, however, see how much damage has been inflicted on the Maoist groups, the CRPF in Sukma has requested the Air Force to provide it with unmanned aerial vehicles to complete a survey of this region, to track down any stragglers, to track down movements of large number of groups. Because something that when we have been speaking to sources who wouldn't want to come in front of the camera, but senior officials, also at least two very senior CRPF officials who were involved in the planning of this of the road clearing party, have said that perhaps somewhere down the line, down the order of hierarchy, down the chain of command, there was some breakdown in communication, because two things stand out. That there was definitely an intelligence failure, considering the fact that eyewitnesses claim that there were anywhere between 150 to 200 to 300 Maoists who were involved in this attack. The fact that such a large number went unnoticed is, of course, is galling. That is number one. The second fact, that there was no backup team, which is a standard operating procedure that should have been followed, that there was nothing that these 99 men of the 74th battalion could fall back on. That is, of course, the second thing that has come out, and this we are talking with very highly placed CRPF sources in Sukma who are operating right now.
All right, Pratyush, hold on to that thought. In fact, we have a reaction from SK Sood, former ADG of the BSF. Let's listen into what he said.
While moving out of their camp for protection of the road, they should have taken due precautions and ensured that their troops moved tactically. Point regarding failure of intelligence, therefore, in my view, is not a valid point. It is the failure of local leadership to provide proper guidance to the troops so that they follow SOPs and they move tactically in that area.
All right, we kind of get a sense from that reaction as to what perhaps went wrong. But Pratyush, as we were talking a short while ago, Dantewada attack cut back, 10 years from, it happened in 2010, I beg your pardon. 76 CRPF Jawans were killed over there. And we are talking about how there was all talk of intelligence lapses. There were talk of how Naxalites know the region really well. CRPF perhaps not that equipped. Maybe the army should be called in. So we are talking about, operation-wise, strategy-wise, everything seems to be the same.
Well, Sana, just to bring our viewers up to date, so two things, and the first thing that I'd like to clarify for anyone who's watching this program is that the talk about army being brought in has now been, and this was about somewhere about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, been dismissed by both the centre and the state governments. Now, they have said that this was an option that was discussed a long time back, but that there would be no involvement of the armed forces, of the army per se, in these operations. So that's number one out of the picture. Number two, post Dantewada, Sana, you very correctly pointed out that yes, there was a lot of talk. And in fact, there was a large amount of lamentation of the fact that the basic intelligence structure that needed to be built up to prevent such large-scale attacks would be put in place so that something like this would never happen again. What we are seeing is that there was a period of lull. Now, this was a period of lull only for those perhaps who follow media reports on this, and unfortunately, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, not much came out in terms of media reports from this region. But the fact remains that the Maoists in Chhattisgarh, especially in this area near the Dankarnia forest, have been active. They have remained active. There was a very small period of lull, yes. The number of Maoists who have died in encounters with security forces has gone up. Yes, the number of large-scale attacks had gone down. Yes, but most of the experts that we have spoken to, and these include people who themselves been former Director Generals of Police, who've been involved in anti-Maoist operations in the past, have pointed out very succinctly that the fact is that the Maoists are there and the ideology is such that it doesn't take much for them to regroup. So while this was perhaps a period of time where they took to re-strategize, to perhaps boost the morale of their cadre, they recouped their resources, but they are very much there and now they are back.
Right.
This is one of the biggest attacks, but more could be coming in the future.
Now Surya, what's the reason for worry over here is that these Naxalites, we are looking at them fighting with the CRPF Jawans who have proper training, who have good weapons, and yet, we see them being defeated. You see the casualty figures. The Bastar police says only 3 Maoists were gunned down. Of course, other figures say about 12 to 13, but that's, just about half of what the casualty in the CRPF, camp has been. So what makes them have this edge over the CRPF Jawans, or rather, does this then pose a question on the ability of our Jawans?
See, I think there is a question of motivation and commitment. I think the Maoists probably have that perhaps in a greater degree than the CRP personnel. There is no doubt that the CRP is better trained, they get a salary every month, they are better armed, they are better equipped. But somehow perhaps the leadership is lacking at that level. And I think that gentleman, Mr. S.K. Sood, referred to it, local level leadership, this is critical. You cannot rely solely on sub-inspectors and inspectors at that level to lead. You must have people with a higher level of training and a higher level of responsibility who can think through situations like this. And that perhaps is where I think the CRP is lacking.
Right. Also,
and that is one area where they need to correct.
Geography is something that has been often talked about. How they know the region better. They have that kind of advantage, and they use the area to their advantage as such. Also, Pratyush, give us a sense of how the attack unfolded. It seemed that the CRPF Jawans virtually walked into this kill zone that was set up. A very well-planned sort of an attack, if we can call it, in Sukma by the Maoists.
Well, you said it right now. It's a kill zone that was created by the Maoists. So the information that we have, and remember this is very preliminary investigation that's been done by the CRPF, which is still coming to terms with the loss of its men. But initial reports would indicate that perhaps two of at least 3 things which can be confirmed is that yes, the movement of the CRPF, which follows a certain standard operating procedure, was not followed in this case. The CRPF was successfully tracked down by the Maoists. This is number one. The fact that and this is something that soldiers who were injured in that attack themselves have commented upon. They said that the Maoists used human shields, the Maoists used local villagers to track them down, and the Maoists chose the timing of their attack to a point where they knew that the CRPF would usually come. They would have their lunch at at some point of time, and they waited. They knew that this time would come, and they waited for this. And the minute the CRPF men laid down their arms, this was the time that these people, that the Maoists took advantage of. They stationed themselves in such a manner, as the CRPF initial report has said, that they took advantage of the local geography of this area. But coming to what something Surya was pointing out, Sana, and 2 things, I just want to add some examples to that so that the viewers understand really what's happening on the ground. And this is something that very senior officials have also told WION, that the armed forces' purpose, the armed forces' role in such areas is to secure a region and then to move forward. But the administration must step into the vacuum. To give you an idea about how much the vacuum persists, out of 290 police stations, the 90-odd police stations that are in the Dankarnia region, at least half of them are without any motor vehicles. So they are essentially, in today's day and age, these are slow response units that in case an emergency, in case the local police needs to be called upon, they wouldn't even have a conveyance to really reach the spot and react. This is number one. The fact that the CRPS top official in this area, that post has been absent, has been vacant for about a month or so now, is itself telling of the fact that somewhere perhaps those that need to make these tough decisions, those that need to ensure that the CRPF, our men who are fighting for us, need to be in top shape, need to be provided everything that they require. They perhaps, their attention wavered. Maybe they lost their focus a little bit.
All right, Pratyush, please stay with me. As you pointed out there, let's get our viewers a bit more detail into that. In the last 2 months, let's tell you that India's largest paramilitary force, which is the CRPF, it's lost 38 personnel in line of duty in 2 major ambush attacks that were carried out by Naxals. Despite that, the force has no chief to head it, and the government hasn't yet appointed its regular Director General. Now, K. Durga Prasad was the last chief of CRPF. He retired this year on the 28th of February, and post that, the Home Ministry had appointed additional DG Sudeep Lakhtakia to hold the charge in additional capacity, although day-to-day operations and work is conducted. But the absence of a chief hits when big and important policy decisions like at the time of this attack have to be taken. All right, Surya, now a very quick reaction from you, and then we'll move ahead. Things like these really that the government needs to take a note of even before these kind of incidents happen. But it chose to ignore it.
It's important, the appointment of a DG. But let's face facts. The DG is merely an administrative head, The real action takes place in Bastar with the IG over there. That is the man who is responsible. Right. And the kind of equation he has with his commandants who are commanding various battalions, how proactive they are, what is the level of intelligence. All these things matter. On the ground, that's what matters, not the guy sitting in Delhi. So you have an ADG there who's fully competent enough to take whatever decisions are required. But the absence of a DG should not affect the functioning of men on the ground in Bastar.
All right. So with that, we move ahead in this special broadcast. The nation has lost 25 CRPF soldiers in what could be considered as the deadliest attack on the armed forces this year. The martyrs are survived by their grieving families who are proud of the sons that they've lost. Take a look.
25 CRPF soldiers have lost their lives in this year's deadliest Maoist attack targeting security forces. About 300 insurgents ambushed 99 CRPF patrolling personnel in the Sukma district of Chhattisgarh. The outnumbered brave CRPF soldiers resisted the ambush for almost 2 hours, but many lost their lives.
एम्बुश ऐसे जा करके ये ईस्ट है, ऐसे घूम करके फिर ऐसे बुरकापाल गांव तक गया था। और इसमें अंदाजा है कि करीब 150-200 माओवादियों ने भाग लिया था, जिसमें कुछ संख्या महिलाओं की भी थी।
CRPF soldier Saurabh Kumar lost his life in Sukma, but his father did not grieve the death of his son as he was martyred for his country.
मुझे इस पर गर्व है, इसमें कोई मुझे परेशानी, कोई दुख तो है, मगर चूंकि मेरा बेटा देश के लिए शहीद हुआ है।
Martyred CRPF soldier Banmali Ebb from Jashpur is survived by his 1.5-year-old daughter. He dreamt of making her a doctor, but will now not be around to see her growing up.
इसे बातचीत मेरे से तो 2-3 दिन का पहले मेरे से हुआ था। और बहू से जो है बात हुआ था, वो हम लोग बोले थे कि छुट्टी करा करके आओ।
Farida, mother of injured CRPF constable Sher Mohammed, is proud of her son. The entire village is praying for his well-being.
लड़ाई नक्सलियों से लड़ाई लड़ रहा और उसने 5 मारे हैं।
The men in uniform who were killed in Sukma are not just cold statistics in India's long war against extremism. Like other fallen colleagues, these were sons and brothers. Like other fallen colleagues, these were sons and brothers, husbands and fathers. India stands with their grieving families, joined in the mourning. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, joining me live at this point in time from New Delhi is Mr. JP Sinha. He's the former IG of the BSF. Thanks so much, sir, for joining us on India Prime. Let me start by asking you what happened in Sukma. Is this a failure of the leadership as such? We are talking about CRPF being, being asked to fight Maoists for years now, a force that was supposed to be the lead counterinsurgency force, but clearly not equipped to go in there in a region like Dantewada or a region like Bastar or Sukma and take on the Maoists. Mr. Sinha, can you hear me?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, we can, sir. I'm asking you, is this the failure of the leadership?
I can hear you now. You see, firstly, I'm really shocked and pained to hear about the death of 25 of our soldiers, and this is before, 75 were done earlier also. The fact is, this is a desperate attempt, I would say, by Maoists to regain their initiative. And therefore, our aim has to be to double our operations, and that too in a mission mode. And for this, we need to immediately reboot our strategy. As you know, all our reports, whether from intelligence agencies or operational commanders and state governments, point to the fact that this is our biggest threat to our internal security as well as the national security. Therefore, we need to immediately reboot our strategy on that. Now, we must know, as you were talking about the issue of the capabilities of the CRPF. Now, the government, as you know, has declared them as a counterinsurgency force. But the fact remains that the battalions have been raised. But they are interchanging with the normal CRP battalions which are meant for law and order duties. Now, I would put it this way, that in case the CRP has to remain as a CIF force, then separate battalions should be specially raised, trained and equipped for this type of operation, which is the left-wing extremism.
Right.
These Maoists, as you know, are well trained, well armed with latest technology. So if CRP has to be used for these operations, then there has to be a separate specialized force, but there should be no interchange between the officers and men who are on normal law and order duties.
Okay, point taken.
Secondly, there has been about this intelligence. Now, what I have heard from the news channels which has been coming up, that there were no police support with the CRPF which has gone for this
right.
Security of the construction of the road there. Now, this is highly, I would say, a big lapse. The police should have been there, and to say that 300 people were already there to ambush 100 people would mean that there is a complete lack of intelligence failure on the part of the state administration. How is it possible that 300 men can surround 100 people knowing fully well that these people have been going daily there? So there is one point where a strategy needs to be relooked.
Right.
Regarding the intelligence failure.
Now,
third very important fact which I have found out with my experience in Manipur and Kashmir, that these were supposed to be liberated zones by the Maoists. Therefore, the aim should be first to liberate a particular area, establish the state authority of law and order and administration, and then carry out development work. Now what happens? You are starting a road construction. Daily the CRP goes there. There is nobody in the night now.
Right.
Now whatever is happening in the last 8 to 10 hours or 12 hours in the night, nobody knows.
Absolutely. Mr. JP Sinha, those
And
3
what
points are
happens
very,
this
very
time?
valid. I want to quickly take another reaction before we end the show because you joined us late. So, involvement of police, the local police, intelligence gathering should be solid, and establishment of law and order before taking on any developmental work in these regions are the points that you've mentioned, which are all very valid points. But what will the government do now is another question. If we compare what happened in Dantewada to what's happened today, it seems that, they were definitely different years, but the narrative hasn't changed. Can you hear me, Mr. Sinha? All right, I think he's lost that audio connection, Surya. We'll try and go back to him. But would you agree with what Mr. Sinha is saying, those very valid points, that he made right now?
No, those are valid points. The question is, what lessons have been learned since all those CRP personnel were killed in all these years, Raising special battalions is a good idea. I think that's why the Cobra battalions were raised. How many have been raised, in what numbers, what is the current level of training and deployment is something we don't know. Obviously, these are confidential operational issues. But I think there is a need to relook the leadership of these battalions, because from what one hears, in the army, the officers and his men train together. Here it is in the police setup, the personnel train on their own, officers train on their own. There seems to be a lack of empathy between officer and man, And perhaps that is one of the reasons why there is a lack of motivation and commitment within the force. Things go wrong.
Absolutely, because these things, even though they are very valid, that Mr. JP Sinha has just pointed out, but there are questions that still remain. What are the lessons that we've learned? Because had we, got a strategy and a plan, then perhaps the Sukma that we saw wouldn't have happened. We'll have to end this show right here. I'd like to thank Mr. JP Sinha, also Surya Gangadharan, WION senior editor, and Pratyush Dubey for joining us on the show. We're going to be taking a short break. More news and updates follow in just a bit. We'll be back.